War was supposed to be a thing of the past. The blood of the Great War had soaked the earth only 2 decades earlier, leaving behind a generation haunted by trenches, gas, and death. But in 1939, the world would watch in disbelief as Germany unleashed a new kind of warfare. Fast, brutal, and unstoppable. They called it Blitzkrieg, the Lightning War. And in just months, it would shatter Europe's fragile peace and ignite the deadliest conflict in human history. Europe, 1939. A continent scarred by the Great War still tried to heal. The nations of Europe sought stability, clinging to peace treaties, disarmament conferences, and desperate diplomacy. But beneath the calm, a storm was forming. In Germany, Adolf Hitler had risen from the ashes of defeat, fueled by vengeance and ideology. To his people, he promised restoration. To his enemies, he promised destruction. In the years leading up to 1939, Hitler rebuilt what the Treaty of Versailles had forbidden: an army of steel, sky, and fury. Tanks rolled through parade grounds, fighter planes soared in defiance of treaties, and soldiers marched under the black and red banners of the swastika. The world watched but did not act. The memories of the First World War still burned too brightly for any nation to risk another. Britain and France followed a policy they called appeasement, hoping that if they gave Hitler what he wanted, he would stop. He demanded Austria, and he took it. He demanded the Sudetenland, and Europe surrendered it to him at Munich. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain returned home proclaiming, "Peace for our time." But peace would not last. Behind the scenes, Hitler's ambitions grew darker. He no longer sought just to unite German-speaking people. He sought Lebensraum, living space, for the German Reich. His eyes turned eastward toward Poland. To invade meant war with Britain and France. But Hitler believed they would never fight. On the night of August 31st, 1939, a small group of German operatives staged a false flag attack on a radio station near the Polish border, pretending to be Polish saboteurs. Their goal: to create the illusion of Polish aggression. Hours later, at dawn on September 1st, Hitler addressed his nation. "At this moment," he said, "German troops have been firing back since 5:45 this morning. The invasion of Poland had begun." Columns of German tanks, the Panzers, rumbled across the countryside, supported by waves of Stuka dive bombers screaming from the sky. The world had never seen anything like it. The Blitzkrieg, the Lightning War, was born. Unlike the slow, grinding trench warfare of World War I, Blitzkrieg combined air power, armor, and rapid movement to paralyze the enemy before they could respond. Stukas dove to annihilate communication lines and railways. Tanks sliced through weak points in the enemy's defense. Motorized infantry followed, surrounding and crushing isolated Polish units. Within days, Poland's defenses were collapsing. In Warsaw, civilians huddled in basements as German bombs reduced the city to rubble. Fires raged across the skyline as families fled in terror. The Polish army, brave but outmatched, fought desperately. Cavalry charges against armored divisions became symbols of defiance and tragedy. By mid-September, Poland's fate was sealed. Then, on September 17th, a new blow fell. The Soviet Union, bound by the secret terms of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, invaded Poland from the east. The country was carved apart, two totalitarian powers dividing a nation between them. By early October, Poland was gone. The world was stunned. Britain and France had declared war on Germany, but they did not move. No armies marched to Poland's aid. The Western Front remained eerily quiet, a period soon called the Phony War. But in Berlin, Hitler rejoiced. His gamble had worked. The Wehrmacht had crushed an entire country in just over a month. Behind the triumph, though, the seeds of greater conflict were already being sown. In the West, Allied forces prepared for a defensive war, erecting the Maginot Line, a fortress network along France's border. In the east, Hitler turned his attention towards Scandinavia and Western Europe. The Lightning War had just begun. Through the harsh winter of 1939–40, Germany consolidated its new territories. Poland's citizens fell under brutal occupation, their culture suppressed, their leaders executed or imprisoned. The Nazi regime began deportations, forced labor, and the systematic persecution of Jews, the dark prelude to horrors yet to come. But even as Germany celebrated victory, Hitler worried. Britain and France were still at war with him, and he needed resources, especially iron ore from neutral Sweden. That ore traveled through Norway's ports, particularly Narvik. To secure it, Germany began planning its next strike. Meanwhile, the Allies made their own missteps. In an attempt to disrupt the German iron supply, they considered mining Norwegian waters and occupying ports in Norway, violating its neutrality. Hitler decided to act first. By April 1940, the world would once again witness the terrifying efficiency of Blitzkrieg. This time, not in the fields of Poland, but across the snow and fjords of Scandinavia. The fall of Denmark, Norway, and the West, April 9, 1940. Dawn broke over Scandinavia under the thunder of engines. Across the skies of Denmark and Norway, German bombers appeared, and below them, paratroopers descended from the clouds. The world awoke to find another nation under attack. Operation Weserübung, the invasion of Denmark and Norway, was underway. It was one of the boldest and most complex operations Germany had ever attempted. The goal: secure vital supply routes, capture airfields, and control the icy ports that carry Swedish iron ore to the Reich. In Denmark, resistance was brief. The small Danish army was no match for the might of the Wehrmacht. In less than 6 hours, Denmark surrendered, one of the swiftest conquests in modern history. For the first time, Blitzkrieg had crossed national borders by land, air, and sea, a total war of speed and shock. Norway, however, would not fall so easily. Its rugged mountains and loyal defenders, aided by British and French troops, put up fierce resistance. German warships faced torpedo attacks and minefields. But Hitler's gamble paid off once again. The Germans struck key cities, Oslo, Bergen, Trondheim, Narvik, with precision and overwhelming force. For the first time, German paratroopers, the Fallschirmjäger, made history as they dropped directly into combat zones. The skies themselves became a battlefield. Though the Allies landed troops and even temporarily recaptured Narvik, they were too late. By June, Norway too had fallen under the swastika. Scandinavia's conquest shocked the world. Hitler had not only secured his northern flank, but had also gained crucial naval bases from which to threaten Britain's lifeline, the sea. And as the northern campaign closed, Hitler's eyes turned westward once more. France, the Low Countries, and Britain, the real enemies, were waiting. In the spring of 1940, Allied forces waited behind the Maginot Line, confident that Germany would attack through the same route as in the First World War. France's generals believed their fortifications were unbreakable, massive concrete bunkers, artillery turrets, and underground railways stretching hundreds of miles. But the Germans had no intention of fighting the last war again. On May 10, 1940, the silence on the Western Front shattered. At dawn, the German army unleashed a coordinated assault across Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. The Blitzkrieg struck again, faster, fiercer, and more devastating than ever. The first phase was psychological. Luftwaffe bombers roared over Dutch and Belgian cities, dropping not only explosives but terror from the skies. Rotterdam was flattened in a single day, leaving thousands dead and tens of thousands homeless. In the streets, panic spread like wildfire. Civilians fled as refugees, clogging the roads that Allied armies desperately needed. As the Allies rushed north to defend Belgium, just as Germany expected, the real German offensive began elsewhere. Deep in the Ardennes forest, considered impassable by tanks, German panzer divisions pushed through with astonishing speed. Within days, they had crossed the Meuse River near Sedan, breaking through the weakest point in the French defense. At the head of this audacious thrust was General Heinz Guderian, the architect of Blitzkrieg itself. His philosophy was simple but revolutionary. Don't stop. Instead of waiting for infantry to catch up, tanks surged forward relentlessly, bypassing pockets of resistance, cutting supply lines, and spreading confusion. Within 5 days, the German spearhead had split the Allied armies in two. The British Expeditionary Force and French First Army were trapped in the north, cut off from the rest of France. By May 20th, German tanks reached the English Channel at Abbeville. The Allied front had collapsed. Britain's soldiers, surrounded at the port of Dunkirk, faced annihilation. But out of disaster came a miracle. As the German advance paused briefly under Hitler's orders, the British launched Operation Dynamo, the evacuation of Dunkirk. From May 26 to June 4th, a desperate flotilla of over 800 vessels, warships, merchant ships, fishing boats, even pleasure craft, crossed the channel again and again under constant bombardment. In 9 days, they rescued over 338,000 Allied troops. It was not a victory, but it was survival. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill would later declare, "Wars are not won by evacuations, but the miracle of Dunkirk gave Britain something far greater than numbers. It gave them hope." While the world celebrated the evacuation, France was collapsing. German divisions regrouped and drove south. Paris was declared an open city to prevent its destruction. And on June 14, 1940, German troops marched beneath the Arc de Triomphe. The same streets that once celebrated French victory in 1918 now echoed with German boots. 6 weeks after the invasion began, France surrendered. On June 22, 1940, in the very railway carriage where Germany had been forced to sign the armistice ending World War I, Hitler took his revenge. France's representatives signed their surrender as Hitler watched in silence, savoring the moment. The humiliation of 1918 had been avenged. The French government divided. Northern France fell under German occupation, while the South became the so-called Vichy regime, a puppet state collaborating with Nazi Germany. French soldiers and citizens faced an impossible choice: submit, resist, or flee. For the Allies, the fall of France was an earthquake. In just 6 weeks, Europe's greatest army had been crushed. The Blitzkrieg had achieved the unthinkable. Speed, surprise, and mechanized coordination had rewritten the rules of war. Old doctrines of static defense and trench warfare were obsolete. The new world of warfare belonged to the machines and to those who could wield them fastest. Now, only one nation remained: the island fortress across the Channel. Britain stood alone. In the summer of 1940, Hitler believed that the war might soon be over. He had conquered most of Europe. His army stood on the shores of the Atlantic. The Soviet Union was still bound by their uneasy pact. Only Britain refused to yield. But to invade Britain, Germany would need something it did not yet possess: control of the skies. As the ashes of France settled, a new campaign was about to begin. It would not be fought with tanks or trenches, but with wings, engines, and fire. The fate of Europe would now hang in the air, over the cities and cliffs of the British Isles. Britain stands alone. Summer 1940. Europe lay in chains. From the Arctic Circle to the Pyrenees, the swastika flew over conquered capitals. Poland was gone. Denmark and Norway subdued. The Netherlands, Belgium, and France all had fallen in lightning succession. Never in modern history had one nation conquered so much so fast. But across the narrow waters of the English Channel, one defiant island refused to bow: Britain, battered, alone, yet unbroken. For Hitler, the next step seemed inevitable: invasion. His generals began drawing up plans for Operation Sea Lion, the code name for the assault on Britain. But there was a problem. To cross the Channel, Germany needed control of the skies. Without it, any invasion fleet would be destroyed by the Royal Navy before it ever reached the English coast. And so began a new phase of Blitzkrieg, one fought not on land, but in the air. The Battle of Britain. In July 1940, the Luftwaffe unleashed its first waves. German bombers crossed the Channel, escorted by swarms of Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters. Their targets: British airfields, radar stations, and aircraft factories. The goal was simple: destroy the Royal Air Force before it could resist. But Britain was ready. The RAF's young pilots, many barely out of their teens, rose to meet the oncoming storm in agile Spitfires and sturdy Hurricanes. Outnumbered, they fought with astonishing courage. From dawn to dusk, the skies over southern England roared with dueling engines, tracer fire, and smoke. It was a new kind of war, fast, vertical, merciless. For weeks, the Luftwaffe pounded Britain. Londoners watched dogfights from rooftops, cheering their defenders as streaks of white vapor cut across the blue. Beneath those contrails, entire squadrons fought and died in minutes. The radio crackled with Churchill's words that would define a generation. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. The RAF's few, as they came to be known, held the line. British radar, a new and secret advantage, allowed them to detect incoming raids early and intercept with precision. Day after day, German losses mounted. Frustrated, Hitler changed tactics. If he couldn't break the RAF, he would break British morale. The Luftwaffe began targeting cities: London, Coventry, Liverpool, and Birmingham. All would feel the terror of the Blitz. Night after night, the sirens wailed. Families huddled in shelters as bombs rained from the sky. Streets burned, cathedrals crumbled, and the glow of fires lit the horizon. Yet Britain did not yield. In the darkness, the nation found unity. Firefighters battled infernos. Nurses tended to the wounded. Ordinary citizens cleared rubble at dawn and went to work as if nothing had happened. The bombs had destroyed buildings, but not resolve. By October 1940, Hitler faced the truth. The Royal Air Force could not be broken. The invasion of Britain was postponed indefinitely. Blitzkrieg, for the first time, had failed. But even in failure, the lesson was clear. The age of lightning war had begun, and its reach would soon extend across continents. While Britain endured the Blitz, Hitler's strategists refined their methods. New tanks, faster aircraft, better coordination, all lessons from Poland, France, and Britain. Blitzkrieg had proven itself the most formidable weapon of modern warfare. But behind its mechanical brilliance lay a moral void. The same ruthless efficiency that crushed armies would soon be turned against civilians across occupied Europe. From 1939 to 1940, the world had watched a nightmare unfold and realized that no treaty, no promise, no wall of fortifications could stand against this new kind of war. The Blitzkrieg had redrawn the map of Europe in a single year. It had transformed Germany into an empire of conquest. And it had awakened a sleeping giant, the determination of free nations to fight back. In the coming years, that resolve would ignite the world. The United States would join the war. The Soviet Union would be drawn into the conflict. And the tide, which once swept swiftly in Germany's favor, would one day turn. But in 1940, that future was still uncertain. The world stood at the edge of darkness, and the lightning of Blitzkrieg still flashed across the storm. As Britain endured the winter of 1940, its cities scarred and smoking, its people exhausted but unbroken, one truth had become clear: this war would not be short. The age of quick victories was over. The struggle for the survival of freedom had only begun. If you've ever been moved by this story, by the courage of those who stood against impossible odds, by the speed at which history changed forever, Take a moment to support the journey we're rebuilding here. Like this video if you believe their story deserves to be remembered. Share it with someone who needs to understand how fragile peace can be. And subscribe to follow this entire series as we continue through the battles, the heroes, and the horrors that defined the Second World War. Because the lightning of Blitzkrieg was just the beginning. The firestorm that followed would change the world forever.